Hi, everybody. I'm Diane Brady. I'm here with David Risher, who is the new CEO of Lyft. David, welcome. We're catching you on day 2.
It's
What
great to be
changes
here.
have you
Thanks,
made so
Dan.
far? I've heard about happy hour. I think that's it for. You know what? I love the fact that you did Undercover Boss before anyone even knew you were the boss. So the first thing you did was go and do a Lyft drive. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, it was a Saturday evening. My wife was out of town, and I think the only mistake I made is that I didn't let the communications and marketing guys know about it until after the fact. They were like, "Hey, next time, give us a heads up." But
That's
anyway,
right.
it
That's
was a lot of
right.
fun.
No tipping the boss. Well, I'm intrigued by your background, first of all. Let's start with the basics of what attracted you to this job, because you were in your last job for quite a while, the company you started, World Reader.
Yeah, I was there for 14 years, focused on getting kids reading all around the world so they can reach their potential. And so, yeah, it's a natural question. And look, the short answer is I had been asked to be on the board about 18 months ago of Lyft. And I think what they found attractive about me and why they reached out to me in the first place was my real focus on the customer that I developed over my time, particularly at Amazon, working with Jeff Bezos.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then they looked at the work I'd done with World Reader and said, this is a person who actually has really good values and really clear values. We know what he stands for and really does want to make the world a better place. And so when they approached me about the idea of throwing my hat in the ring for CEO, I mean, look, my first answer was it was that's crazy, But my second answer was, you know what, that actually is really an interesting possibility because if I look at my time at Microsoft, where I really learned about competition and how to compete hard, at Amazon, my focus on the customer, as I just mentioned, and then World Reader, this idea of really leading with purpose, but also doing a lot with less. Really being, frankly, fairly frugal, but having some big results. We put all this together, and I think they work really well at Lyft. So got me super excited about it, and here I am.
Well, so talk about the doing more with less. Is Lyft at a juncture right now where it needs to do more with less? I mean, the recent results were pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, look, we had our biggest quarter ever last quarter in terms of top line, just sort of number of riders we've had. But we're not the only ones who are looking at our financial situation and saying, let's make sure our costs are right sized for what we're trying to do. You know, Drivers want to make a good pay,
Mm-hmm.
and those on the driver's side, and riders want to have a great experience and don't want to pay very much. I mean, that's just a universal truth. And so as we bring, drivers and riders together, we have to figure out a way to do it as efficiently as we can so that we can, for example, not be any more expensive than anyone else there on the market. I don't want to be more expensive than Uber. That's not a good business strategy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the frame we're looking at is what do our riders and drivers need? And then what are the costs that we need to have in order to support, a great business?
Every company always has stakeholders, and of course, every child is precious, so you don't want to choose, but you have this constituency of stakeholders who are the drivers, the riders you mentioned. Where do you see the most opportunity for upside? Especially, there were some talent shortages in the past year. I know there's been a lot of focus on recruiting drivers. Is that
Yeah.
still the priority?
You're right. I mean, of course, you can't
We
pick
love
your
them
favorite.
all, but,
But if you
Sophie's
have to,
choice. Yeah.
I sometimes say this to my own daughters. I'm like, I can't pick my favorite, but if I have to, and then I realize it's not even a good joke. You
Yeah.
can't even go
No,
there.
no, no.
So look, for sure, as we came out of COVID, driver supply was the constraint, right? It's no fun as a rider to push a button and then have the closest car be 9 minutes away. In our world where we're all sort of impatient, that feels like forever. So that was the big focus. Now we're at that point. We're now getting to a point where they're much more imbalanced. We have a lot of drivers who come onto the platform really liking the control it gives them, the control over their earnings, the control because they can always drive more, and control over their time. They don't have to kind of clock out in order to go to, a party or whatever it is. So from a driver's perspective, we've got a pretty good value proposition. And so the more drivers are happy, of course, the faster pickups happen, which means the more riders are happy. So it really is a cycle that you kind of have to feed both sides, and you have to be aware where you're in an imbalance, and then kind of correct for that.
So where is the room to improve then? What do you think is going to look different, say, a year from now? We're sitting down and I say, so how was your past year? What did you do?
Yeah. So, I mean, of course, this is an area where I'd love to tell you all kinds of plans, but they're probably best, after we launch rather than before. But here's in general what I can say. I would hope that for our drivers, they say, gosh, this last year has really has Lyft has really improved the driver experience. And it's already good, to be clear. Like, this is not an area of weakness for us, but there are always things we can improve. And as we bring more and more drivers onto the platform, I really want them to have a great experience. I'll tell you actually a tiny anecdote. I got my first message yesterday morning when I woke up was from an elementary school friend of mine. And we haven't really even kept up, but we're Facebook friends. So he sent me a Facebook message and he said, I'm considering going full time as a Lyft driver. And, how can I be helpful to you? Can I give you feedback? And I said, his name is Adam. I said, of course, I love that idea, Adam. I really appreciate it. And I'm really looking forward to your feedback. I want to make sure that driving, for Lyft is an experience that people want to do. He happens to be, in his 50s. There are plenty of kids in their 20s who also would love a job like this. And so I want to make it a great experience. So that's one. And then on the passenger side, I think there's a lot of opportunity on the rider side, I should say, to be, let's say, more differentiated based on the use case. That's sort of the technical term. So for example, taking a Lyft home at 5 o'clock in the evening as a commuter is not really the same experience. Or today it is, but maybe it doesn't need to be the same experience as going out, at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night to a party, or going to the airport, Sunday morning when you really, really need to be picked up, at a certain time, and the last thing you want is any variability or even a lot of fun. You just want to get to the airport reliably. Those are three different scenarios, and I don't think that anyone, and this includes Uber, has yet done a great job in distinguishing among those scenarios so that every one of them is a great experience for.
Well, how would it look different? So let's say I'm going to the airport, yes, on time. Like, am I treated different? Like, can you give me some? Is there any example of how you imagine this is executed on the ground? Are they treating me differently at 9 o'clock on a Friday night than they are at 5 o'clock on Tuesday?
I mean, and again, not to sort of reveal too much of what goes on behind the scenes, but like, and two obvious things would be
nuggets, just some nuggets, yeah.
Right. No, but Saturday night maybe you have the music on. Sunday morning at 6 o'clock in the morning maybe you don't. Sunday morning 6 o'clock in the morning, if your flight is at 8, you really want that to be at 6 o'clock on the dot or before. Whereas Friday night going out for dinner, maybe you can kind of deal with kind of a couple minutes back and forth. So even if it's just that, really focusing on a certain type of reliability and focus for the airport ride, which is a little bit different, and then focus a little more on the entertainment side for Saturday night, you can see how those, if we're designing those experiences right, they might end up feeling somewhat different, even though the fundamental, car pulls up is the same.
So you obviously have there's the obvious pain points of the economy and who knows what happens, but talk about some of the other issues that you have to deal with that are just part of the environment, sustainability being one, the transition to electric vehicles and the role that Lyft plays. Let's start with that.
Sure. So I'm super excited about that one. I mean, I think that, so the world is going electric quite quickly in cars, and you see that other countries, actually China now, something like a third of the new cars are being sold as electric cars. I think in the US it's around 5%, but that will grow and grow and grow and grow. Not just because whatever the government is supporting it and so forth, but because the cars are actually better. They're more reliable. They're faster off the mark and so forth. So as that happens, we have an opportunity to really be a lot of people's first impression of electric cars, right? For a lot of people, I mean, as I say, it's only 5% of car sales in the US right now, if that. So that means 95% of people basically have no exposure to electric cars. Whereas in 10 years, if the forecasts are right, it'll be something like 50% or more. So how are people going to get that exposure? How are they going to be able to ask questions about, what the cars are really like? Well, gosh, we can play a real role there. So I'm super, super excited about that.
So what role do you play? Are you encouraging drivers? Basically, will they be coming to you as the platform through which they get electric vehicles, or what? Because you're essentially a matchmaker, and much more, of course, but you're not out there buying vehicles for your drivers.
Well, we do in some cases.
Okay.
We have a product internally called Express Drive. I think that may be an external name as well, that allows people to go and effectively lease cars through kind of our
So that's the
platform.
mechanism through which you'll bring in the electric vehicles and such.
That can be one. Yeah,
Are
exactly.
are there
Exactly.
regulatory issues still? Because and this is something you'd be familiar with from World Reader. I mean, I remember there was a point at which you had to work out that sort of common good of the taxis versus Lyft versus Uber. Do you still deal with that as you're expanding in other parts of the world, or do you feel like that's pretty much resolved?
I think that's going to be an ongoing thing, for a long time. It's not a major issue in most of the markets we work in, most of the markets, and this is, of course, predates me by a lot.
Yeah.
John and Logan and even the leadership at Uber have done it was a little complicated job in the early days, but I think more recently, a very sort of, kind of responsible way of working with cities and making sure cities understand that we're good partners and so forth. So I don't think that's as big of an issue. I think if you're looking at macro trends, I think on the positive side, there are so many people now, and again, COVID is still a little bit on our minds, who've sort of lost a little of the muscle of coming to work, for example. CEOs are quite concerned about this. Or even if going out, when I was a driver, as I said a couple of weekends ago, I think half of the people I drove said something like, this is one of my first nights out, kind of post-COVID. Now, San Francisco's been a little slow to come back and so forth. So there are different things going on there. But I think as that happened, as people are reminded, of how fun it is to get together and how much more fun it is, for example, to go to a movie than only to watch, Netflix at home. I think there's actually a lot of kind of wind at our back that we're going to start to feel.
I heard you made $26 an hour, so good for you. Is that pretty much the average pay now for a Lyft driver?
It depends market to market, and even time of day. What I thought was so interesting, and I really appreciated it, is as soon as I opened up the driver's app, it gave me an estimate of how much they thought I would make per hour in San Francisco driving on a Saturday night. The estimate was $25. I did a little bit better, which I thought was great, right? It gives you some real visibility into, and again, this gets back to people liking control over their lives.
So I want to ask a little bit about the co-founders who are now going on the board. That's
Mm-hmm.
both an asset. It can be a challenge when you've got the people who've built the company, spent more than a decade building it. What advice do you have to them, or have they given you to make you successful in this role with them right there to watch you every step of the way?
It's so interesting. This is an area where I actually think Logan and John they are doing best in class work here. And I mean that, so sincerely. They have been so clear with me that their entire purpose at this point, which is a word I use a lot, purpose, is to make sure that Lyft is in as good a state as it possibly can be, given, where their skills are and so forth and so on, and then hand it over to me. And I've seen this day after day. It's only my second official day on the job, but I've been here in the office off and on, kind of around the edges for, coming up on a month now. And the degree to which they have been willing to say, David, this is your decision. David, this is, and it's hard. It's hard. I mean, it's their baby, so, but anyway, they've done a great job of that. And it's, and I think that their new role on the board, they're both really looking forward to, there's this old saying in board world where it's noses in, hands off. So you want to pay attention. You want to know what's going on, maybe give advice, but your job is not to run the company. And their commitment to that is exemplary, and I've seen it, day after day.
Forgive my ignorance. Was there a CEO search?
There was.
And did you
Yeah, I'll give you a
review
little story.
and you must have reviewed some of the candidates, and it must be weird to then think, well, yeah, I am better than all of them.
That's not the way I think about it, to be honest.
I'm projecting.
Yeah, it's right there. Yeah, no, it was, but it was, the whole experience was a little bit surreal, if I'm honest. I mean, I was not, John and Logan came to the board at the end of last year saying, after, 14 years of this being sort of a 24/7 job, we're really ready to hand the reins over to somebody else, or the wheel, I guess is probably the better metaphor. And the board did what boards do, right? They hired, they formed a search committee. I was not on that committee. They hired an executive search firm. The executive search firm found something like 100 candidates out of, 1,000 potential, say 100 potential candidates. And then, I think it was about a dozen of kind of a short list. But what I think happened at that point is the more John and Logan talked to these folks, the more they realized that, just kind of crazily enough, the person that might be the best person to run the organization with the right set of skills and the right set of values might already be here on the board.
Well, that's actually a
But that's
common
the process.
strategy, isn't it? I mean, having somebody on the board is actually a great way to expose them to the company. We've seen other companies do that. I have one last question because I know our time is tight. You're a busy man,
Sure.
and you're day 2 on the job, which
Yeah.
is I'm intrigued by the fact that you studied comparative literature
Yeah.
undergraduate wise. Not just what did you want to be when you grew up, but that does give, I think, some, it's heartening perhaps to other parents whose kids are going in that direction. Did that equip you well for the job you're in now? You've spoken about your work experience. What about your academic
Education.
pre-MBA experience?
It absolutely did. It absolutely. I'm a huge advocate for this, and here's why. Look, Google has all the data. The internet has all the information. The Chat GPT can write a great letter, all sorts of things. But what is very, very hard for computers to do, but very easy for humans to do, is take complex situations and solve problems and come up with a big vision. I really want our vision to be bringing people together. It's so important in this highly virtual digital world we have for people to have physical connection. Lyft can do that. That is the type, that's storytelling, and that's looking at at information and trying to figure out what's the theme, and and what does the future look like, right? In any book you read, part of what your brain is doing is thinking, what is going to happen next? What is my prediction that's going to happen next? That's what makes reading fiction particularly so interesting, is you're sort of trying to guess a little bit of where things are going to go, and that tunes your brain up in a way that is quite applicable to many things. So yeah, look, I think reading and liberal arts education, I think, is a vaccine against ignorance and obsolescence. I can talk about this for hours, but it's
I can't let you go. I can't let a comp lit man who's built this, the digital book company you built, without
yeah.
asking what one of your favorite books is, or a book that was very formative, influential for you.
I mean, here's what's hard for me. Back to it's hard to pick your favorite child.
You can pick two
For me,
or
my
three.
favorite book is almost always the book I just finished. So I just read this, and the title's funny, but Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. Just an epic, almost sort of a retelling of the Odyssey, which is also a favorite book of mine, but kind of an epic journey type book. And I'm a sucker for that. On the business side of things, I think Shoe Dog is one of the great business
Oh, Phil
books
Knight.
by Phil Knight. Yep, I just think one of the great, because you can feel the passion come through. I think what makes so many business books just dull as paste is they sound like they're trying to write sort of a business school textbook. But again, it's the stories where you really get the learning, and the people are willing to talk about their mistakes. And Phil Knight was so brutally honest about
Yeah.
where he made some smart decisions and where he just got it wrong.
Yeah, it's true. They're like diet books, aren't they? Eat less, exercise more. The advice is intuitive. It's how the person executed on it. So,
Always.
well, I look
Always.
forward to this, the start, I'm sure, of your next chapter, and look forward to continuing the conversation. Good luck, David.
Diane, it's been a huge pleasure. Thanks for your questions.
Thanks. Bye-bye.